Hey, good morning and welcome to Coffee with Kevin. We're starting just a few minutes late, but I think it's important for us to have this conversation this morning. So I'm on here. I'm still having difficulty with the dial in process. I'm going to try to work on that today to get that fixed. But we're moving forward and we're going to try to do this live every day at about 7:15 every morning for about 20 to 30 minutes. So, good morning and welcome to Coffee with Kevin. Yesterday, we spent some time talking about a very basic question. What is the labor commissioner actually supposed to do for the state of Oklahoma? And one of the things I told you yesterday is that you don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to take any other candidate's word for it either. You don't have to rely on campaign literature or political advertising because Oklahoma law actually tells the labor commissioner exactly what they're allowed to do under Title 40, Article 1. And today I want to take this conversation one step further. I want to talk about one word within that statute. And that one word is very clear. It is the word, 5 letters, very simple spelling. And it's not a 4-letter word, but it does begin with S. And that's shall. Shall. So, what does that word mean in the context of the Oklahoma legislature in drafting up Title 40, Article 1? And what does that have to do with the actual meaning of the statute? So here's where it comes to, because when the Oklahoma legislature wrote the duties of the labor commissioner into law, it didn't simply list a bunch of things that might be nice for the labor commissioner to do. It said, it shall be the duty of the labor commissioner to ... And then the legislature told us what those duties are. So now we got to ask, what does the law actually say? I told you yesterday what it said. Let's go ahead and rehash that again today just to refresh our memory. So here it is. This is the Oklahoma law, Title 40, Section 1. It begins by saying the Commissioner of Labor shall be the Chief Executive Officer of the Department of Labor and shall supervise the work at the department. And it goes back to what I said yesterday with when I developed my campaign and I developed my campaign material, I was very specific in what I wanted to do. And as I said yesterday, I'm running to support the dedicated professionals at the Oklahoma Department of Labor. That's first and foremost. And why is that first and foremost in my literature? Because that's what the statute requires of me, that I shall supervise the work of the department. And those dedicated employees up there at the Department of Labor, they don't need somebody coming in with some idealistic crusade and trying to reshape what they do. They are the professionals that do the work and have been doing the work for years. So why do they need a leader coming in there and telling them, all right, we're gonna shake everything up, we're gonna do everything different, we're gonna build a pipeline to nowhere, we're gonna build this pipeline that creates all this other additional bureaucracy, and we're gonna build this pipeline that might additionally cost the taxpayers money. I don't believe in that. I do believe in building pipelines for workers to have good paying jobs. We need to consider the worker in all of this, not just what the employee needs or the employer needs. Those dedicated people, they serve all 77 counties and for enforcing workplace safety standards, supporting workers, and responsible employers and overseeing critical inspections that keep the public, you, everybody around you, everybody who goes into an office building and rides an elevator or an escalator, everybody who goes into a school that is still being heated by a boiler. And we got boilers in industry too that have to be inspected. And those inspections have to be done by qualified inspectors from the Department of Labor. There's much more responsibility than that as well. We have people within the Department of Labor who spend an enormous amount of their time investigating wage theft. And you would be surprised at how rampant that has become, because we're starting to see a lot of employers understanding that with diminished labor department inspectors, they can go ahead and do whatever they want to do. They can start say, all right, we're going to add some additional fees or deductions of people's wages that they may not have agreed to. And that goes back into the employer's pockets. If that happens and a labor inspector is able to get a hold of that information and can follow through with it, then that employer can get a fine. And those are the kinds of things that I call shortcuts. When employers take shortcuts like that in order to make a profit, that to me is demeaning to the employees, and it's also hurting other businesses out there who are doing things the right way. So getting back to the Commissioner of Labor shall be the chief executive of the Department of Labor and shall supervise the work of the department. So there's the first responsibility. The person elected as labor commissioner is the chief executive officer of the Oklahoma Department of Labor. That means this is an executive leadership position. Then we get on to subsection B, and here's where I want to listen. I want you to listen carefully to the language. It says, it shall be the duty of the Commissioner of Labor to, and then it lists four things for us. Number one, foster and promote and develop the welfare of the wage earners of this state. That's so critical. That is absolutely it's listed as the number one thing. Foster, promote, and develop the welfare of the wage earners of this state. So when I hear people talk about this supposed pipeline for employers, I keep asking the question, are we doing this the right way? Yes, we need to have, the ability for people to find good paying jobs. But is this pipeline only for the employers, or is it also for the employees? Is it going to help the employees get what they need? Or is it going to be a fair wage? Is it going to provide for and foster, promote, and develop the welfare of that individual? Is it going to provide benefits for that employee? Is it going to provide a retirement program or, just the basic medical insurance that a person needs? Is it going to provide for, as some laws require, medical leave in case a person is pregnant or becomes ill, and protects their job so that they can come back to it? Number two, improve working conditions of the wage earners. This is why it's so important for us to understand and have a proper leader who understands the exact words that are listed here. It shall be the duty of the Commissioner of Labor to improve working conditions of the wage earners. And that's why we have to have systems in place that can work with employers. And we want to have that open door environment where an employer can come to us and say, all right, we're starting a new business. We've got this fabrication system that is going crazy. People are wanting this all over the country, and we're making it out here in small town Oklahoma. And all we have is a very small quantity, and we're building this production so that it's going to be very huge. Are they walking over one another? Are they creating an environment where one person is working on one machine, and as they move around, they're becoming a hazard to a person working on another machine or another part of that same machine? Think about doing a site assessment within that environment. That's why it's so critical for outside views and people who are trained, like the Department of Labor, to train to look for things where We're not crowding all of this stuff into a very small place. Look for ways to expand their and move things around so that it is safe. And then when they can afford to expand, then they can afford to expand in a proper way with some guidance from the Department of Labor on how to do that and do that safely for the employees and actually help with the production and increase production. Number three is advance opportunities for wage earners for profitable employment. Again, we're talking about the future of the employee here. Is it possible for the employee to be able to expand in their opportunities? Is there opportunities for promotion? Is there opportunities for the wage earner for profitable employment? There's a lot to this and a lot that we need to discuss. Those advanced opportunities and advancing the opportunities of wage earners is such a critical thing because we don't need somebody to go in and just work entirely within a business and just be stagnant in that position unless it's their choice. We've got to give people the opportunity to grow within that. And here's where some things come up. Maybe there's a person out there working at a business who has a small disability. Are we going to restrict their opportunities of that wage earner just because they have a small disability? Or is there ways that we can think about allowing that person to have accommodations so that they can continue to be a profitable employee and improve their station, improve their wages, and of course, improve opportunities for them in the future? And lastly on this is carry into effect all laws in relation to labor enacted by the legislature for which responsibility is assigned to the Commissioner of Labor. That can include a lot of things, and we talk about this. The legislature has put it on to the Department of Labor to investigate wage theft. It's also responsible by the legislatures, put it on to the Department of Labor to investigate child labor law violations. That's all under the responsibility of the Commissioner of Labor and the Department of Labor. So again, those aren't my words on my campaign site. And those aren't the words of my campaign staff. And those aren't the words and those aren't just the words that I came up with because they sounded good in a political speech. I like those words because those words are law. All right, if you're watching and you have comments, please go to the comment section. There's a place over here where you can type comments, and I appreciate anybody who wants to make some comments. I'll try to respond back to them, and we'll try to carry on a conversation until I can get the phone system where you can dial in and actually send information to us. So again, why does shall matter? Now let's talk about the word shall. Again, we all know what the dictionary of that meaning of that word is. But in everyday conversation, we probably don't think much about what it actually means when it comes to law. Because when a legislature writes a law, words matter. And the Oklahoma courts have said the legislature's use of the word shall is normally considered a legislative mandate equivalent to the word must. Now, I'm not an attorney. And that's one of the good things about me is I'm not an attorney, but I understand the legal requirements. And I also look forward to working with attorneys. I don't hide from attorneys because I think that the expertise that they have is invaluable to anybody who wants to embrace their knowledge. And that's their knowledge of the law is so important. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you that the word shall can never have a different legal interpretation depending on the statute or context. Courts interpret statutes, but the general rule in Oklahoma is important. When the legislature says shall, it's normally speaking in mandatory terms. And that's what I want you to think about when we go up back and read the labor commissioner's duties. The legislature didn't say the labor commission, excuse me, the labor commissioner may foster, promote, and develop welfare of wage earners. It says shall be the duty of the commissioner. The legislature didn't say the labor commissioner may, if he or she wants to, improve working conditions or be sidetracked by some idealistic crusade where they want to go on this build this pipeline to nowhere. Their duties are spelled out. My duties as the commissioner will be specific. The labor commissioner shall be the duty. The legislature didn't say maybe we ought to or possibly think about opportunities for profitable employment. It says it shall be the duty of the commissioner to advance opportunities of wage earners for profitable employment. That's a very different message, shall versus may. And here's something else that's fascinating about this statute. The legislature actually uses both words. After listing the duties in Section B, Section C says the Commissioner of Labor may administer oaths, issue subpoenas for attendance of witnesses, and take testimony. There's the word may. So right there is the same statute. We have a different language. In one section, it shall be the duty, and in another section, the Commissioner of Labor may. I think it's worth paying attention to because both of these statutes aren't there just to fill up space. The legislature knows how to use the word may, and it knows how to use the word shall. So when I'm asked to become your next labor commissioner, I'm paying attention to what the legislature actually wrote. Welfare of wage earners. Now let's apply this to the first duty. Foster, promote, and develop the welfare of wage earners in this state. There's another phrase where we're going to have to spend an entire program talking about welfare of wage earners. But just think about it in ordinary terms. Who are Oklahoma's wage earners? They're the people who get up, go to work every day. They're construction workers, they're teachers, they're nurses, they're firefighters. They're people working in manufacturing, working behind counters, driving trucks, working in warehouse, and public employees. They're young people working their first job. They're people trying to earn enough money to provide for themselves and their families. And the Oklahoma legislature specifically put their welfare into the statutory duties of the labor commissioner, and that's significant. Improve working conditions is another one. Think about how broad and important those words are. Improve working conditions of wage earners. What are the working conditions? Is it a safe workplace? Is it that the people working in those locations are properly trained? Are the laws governing your workplace being followed? If you're a public employee and the applicable occupational safety and health standards, are they being followed? If you're a young worker, are the child labor laws being followed? If you're an employer trying to do everything correctly, can you get the information you need to understand your responsibilities? Working conditions affect people's lives every single day. And once again, the statute doesn't describe improving working conditions merely as interesting ideas. The legislature placed it in the list that begins, it shall be the duty of the Commissioner of Labor. Let's talk about profitable employment. This is the third one that we talked about earlier, and I want to get into it a little bit deeper. And this one, I think, deserves a tremendous amount of discussion during this campaign. Advance opportunities for wage earners for profitable employment, not merely employment, profitable employment. What does that mean? That's a question we're going to explore much more deeply during these programs. But I think we can start with at least this. When we're talking about Oklahoma's workforce, the worker has to be part of that conversation. We hear an awful lot about employers' need for Oklahoma's workforce, and I've talked about it extensively here, and you hear other candidates talking about it as well, because they are so focused on what the employer's needs are. And I'm going to be focused on the employers, but I'm also going to be very focused on employees. But here's why I'm focused on the employers. We need successful Oklahoma businesses. We need businesses investing in Oklahoma. We need businesses creating jobs. But the statute we're talking about specifically tells the labor commissioner to advance opportunities of wage earners for profitable employment. So I think we ought to be asking, what opportunities are we creating for the worker? Can the worker build a career? Can that worker advance? Can that worker acquire skills that make his or her labor more valuable? Can the worker support a family? Can that worker build some economic security? Those are conversations I believe belong in the campaign for labor commissioner. And then the last thing I want to talk about is carrying out the law. And then and this is the part that I think is as equally important as everything else we've talked about. This is quoted from the statute. Carry into effect all laws in relation to labor enacted by the legislature for which responsibility is assigned to the Commissioner of Labor. This one is incredibly important, and that's because you're electing a public official. You didn't get to substitute your personal preference for the law when I ran for office. I have to follow the law. So if the legislature has assigned a labor law to me, the Commissioner of Labor, the statute says it shall be the commissioner's duty to carry the law into effect. I may not agree with every law. I might disagree with some laws, and I might advance or advocate that the legislature change a law. But when the law is on the books and responsibility for it is assigned to me, I've got a responsibility to carry out that law. That's part of the public service. And what about responsible employers? Let's talk about that part of it too. Now, everybody may hear all of us talk about wage earners and ask, Kevin, where do employers fit into this? And that's a fair question, because I don't believe protecting workers and supporting responsible employers is contradictory ideas. Quite the opposite. If you're an Oklahoma employer who follows the law, pays people properly, invests in safety, trains your employees, and takes your responsibilities seriously, why should you have to compete against somebody who gains an advantage by cutting corners? You shouldn't. Fair enforcement helps create a level playing field. And our government should also help responsible employers understand what compliance requires. I don't want the Oklahoma Department of Labor hiding in the bushes waiting for someone to make a mistake. I want a department that is visible. I want a department that communicates. I want workers to know what it does, and I want employers to know what it does. I want employers to be able to ask questions and get answers. I want the enforcement when necessary, and I want law enforced fairly and consistently. And I want the public to know exactly what we do so that they don't have to assume, what does the Department of Labor actually do? What does this mean for this election? So now let's bring this back to this election. I'm not asking you simply to believe Kevin Dawson. Look, I'm just another person out here running for a job. And my application for this job is appealing directly to you to vote for me. That's the only way that I'm going to get this job. but I believe I'm the most qualified person for that job. And because of that, I do a lot of research and I do a lot of studying about the duties and responsibilities of the labor commissioner. And I go read the law, and I ask you to do the same thing. Go read Title 40, Section 1. Look at what the legislature says the labor commissioner shall do. Then go look at my campaign, my website, kevinldawson.com. Look at the material that I put out. Look at all the things that I put on here about the Commissioner of Labor and what I want to do with that by protecting workers, supporting responsible employers, and applying the law fairly. That's quite simply exactly what the Labor Commissioner requirements are. And that's all I want us to do is just stick to basics. Look at my experience and then go look at the other candidates and their experience. Do they have leadership skills? Have they served in a capacity where they have been a leader of thousands of people like I have? Have they been responsible for large budgets? I have. Have they been responsible for training people? I have. Have they been responsible for doing inspections? I have. Those are all the things that we should all be looking at. And I can promise you this, I have far more experience and qualifications. And it also includes having a bachelor's and master's degree from the University of Oklahoma in leadership. So when I say that I have leadership capability, I can back it up. And compare every one of us against the same standard, not my standard, not their standard, the Oklahoma standard. Ask yourself, does this candidate understand the welfare of wage earners? Does this candidate have a plan for improving working conditions? Does this candidate understand what profitable employment means to Oklahoma workers? Does this candidate have the understanding that the laws and programs entrusted to the department and what they are? And does this candidate have the executive experience necessary to actually lead the Department of Labor? Those are the questions every voter has a right to ask. And finally, one word, the word that we've been talking about today, shall. Shall is such an important word because it is mandatory. Yesterday, we talked about the labor commissioner and what the labor commissioner is supposed to do. Today, we're talking about why the language matters. Oklahoma law says it shall be the duty of the commissioner of labor. That is where I believe every candidate for this office ought to begin. Not with what we wish the office was, not with some new program that sounds good in a campaign advertisement, but may never be followed through. Start with the office that Oklahoma actually created. Start with the responsibility Oklahoma actually already assigns to it. And then tell the people of Oklahoma how you're going to fulfill those responsibilities. That's how I'm approaching this campaign. So tomorrow we're going to take the next step. We're going to talk about a phrase in this law that deserves much more attention, the welfare of wage earners. We're going to go into this in detail. What does that actually mean? Who are we talking about? And what does welfare mean in context to the Department of Labor? And what is the responsibility that we have to take place on every person Oklahoma elects as labor commissioner? Every person who is elected to labor commissioner has a specific responsibility. That's tomorrow's conversation. Until then, I'm Kevin Dawson, candidate for Oklahoma Labor Commissioner. Thank you for joining me in this morning in this conversation, and let's keep this conversation going. So I also want to talk about, I'm working hard because I want us to have a conversation here that's a two-way conversation where you can call me up on the telephone and talk to me. And I'm working on that. I thought I had things set up to do that today, but there's a little bit of a glitch. I'll get that fixed. Second of all, we're expanding this. Right now, we're only on the platforms of Coffee with Democrats. In the future, we're going to be expanding this into platforms of the Dawson for Labor. I'm going to be bringing this into a YouTube channel, and we should have that ready either tomorrow or the following day so that we can carry this conversation onto the platforms that you expect to find him on. So, folks, until tomorrow, and as we go down the tracks of a new day, let's keep this conversation rolling.